Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. I hope you're having a great conference as I am. We're so excited to see everyone here. This is a shorter little session, so we're going to be going through two different projects and just giving highlights today, but please feel free to reach out to any of us after if you'd like to chat further about these projects, because we are happy to give more information on both of these. So this is Reimagining Inclusive Design and Policies with OER and Open Pedagogy, going beyond the affordability catch with OER. Our team today is myself, Nikki Cannon-Retch. I am a research services librarian at Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia, and also the OER librarian. I'm joined today by one of my campus colleagues, Dr. Tawan Wilson, who is the Associate Vice President and Inclusive Excellence and Chief Diversity Officer for Georgia Southern, and also by CJ Ivory, who is a librarian and assistant professor at the University of West Georgia. So this is what we plan to go over basically today. We're going to talk about the Inclusive Excellence Action Plan that has become a campus-wide initiative at the Georgia Southern campus. We're going to talk about how we've worked OER into this plan and kind of what now? What do we do now that we have these words in the plan stating that OER is a part of it? And then CJ is going to go over how she has incorporated the social justice framework into her OER work, how she's been working with faculty to discuss transformative approaches to developing their OERs, and how she's working social justice into the disciplines of many different academic areas. So I'm going to start today by letting you know how Georgia Southern has defined inclusive excellence. And basically it's the recognition that our success is dependent on and tied directly to how we value, engage, and include the rich diversity of all of our community members. And as we were developing this plan, or I should say Dr. Wilson was developing this plan because he is kind of a solo team right now. He did many community halls and town halls and asked for feedback. And these are just some of the quotes that we were seeing across the board on our campus. That inclusive excellence is not only seeing diverse faces or including those marginalized voices, but it's creating a fair and just environment for all of those persons to safely engage in. That inclusive excellence encourages our individuals to challenge their preconceptions, their assumptions. It provides a setting where these individuals are challenged with exposure to a variety of experiences, people, ideas, and viewpoints. And also that inclusive excellence allows us all to harness the power of and the gift of our different lived experiences. And that when we use that, we create better outcomes and solutions. And also, hopefully these will help teach each of us to recognize the conditions that leave some members of our group feeling less connected to the community as a whole. So OER was a natural fit into all of this, and I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Wilson to speak a little bit about this plan.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So as a part of our campus-wide initiatives to move inclusive excellence forward at Georgia Southern University, we recognized that we needed a comprehensive plan. And so we wanted to also embed OER into that plan. We must ensure that students see themselves in course materials. We understand that very clearly. We wanted to honor that wealth of ideas, experiences, and perspectives that are reflected in the world. And we wanted to make sure that our students could see themselves in that space. And we feel firmly as well that we owe it to our students and our faculty to keep evaluating, adjusting, and updating our course materials as well. And so with the help of Nikki, we embedded very specific language around OER. So specifically in goal 1, and I won't read all of this to you all, but we have 4 comprehensive goals in our Inclusive Excellence Action Plan. I did drop a link in the chat for those of you who are interested in taking a look. But in goal 1, strategy 1D, action 5, We speak specifically to encouraging our faculty to incorporate and diversify their course materials by exploring OER, because we recognize, right, that this can be revised and restructured to better represent the rich diversity of our students. And then it actually shows up a second time on the next slide here. So in goal 4, strategy 4C, action 10, we speak specifically about how we incentivize the use of OER at the university. And we're excited to do that. It's important to note that this plan just launched about a month ago. Our next step, feel free to go ahead to the next slide. Our next step here is that every academic college, every central administrative unit, our faculty senate, and our staff council are now required to develop their own inclusive excellence action plans utilizing a centralized template that I've also created. Those plans are due back to my office on March 15th. And so everyone has to address the intersection of OER in their work. And we're really excited about that because what it accounts for is ensuring that we have real accountability at the institution. We know the name of the game in diversity, equity, and inclusion is accountability, right? And so this ensures that everyone is thinking with some level of intentionality. Additionally, there will be regular assessment of progress in this specific area as determined by the key performance indicators established by our academic colleges and our central units. We are also working specifically on educational partnerships with our libraries as well as our Center for Teaching Excellence, or our CTE. Specifically, we're developing new OER faculty development grants. We want our faculty members to really take this seriously. We recognize we have to put our money where our mouths are. And so we have funding opportunities that will be available specifically for folks who are interested in engaging in this work. And then we're also going to do some OER programming grants for our students as well. We want to take this into the student org side, student activities. And as they program and develop content on campus, we want to make sure that they're also mindful and intentional in the same manner as well. And so that is where we are as an institution with our high-level strategy, embedding this in a way that we hope really allows us to curate OER with some level of intentionality so that we can enhance culturally responsive teaching at our university.
Okay, so what this partnership looks like for the library and also for CTE is a lot more education and training and that opportunity to present it, and of course the incentive for faculty to attend it. So more workshops, repeating some of the workshops we've already created, possibly holding some creation sprints and exploratory seminars, giving faculty an actual opportunity to get hands-on and really explore some of these materials, and also explore adding more inclusive voices and diversifying their course content in ways that they haven't thought about before. We're going to do this hopefully by providing some examples and ideas that they can draw from, highlighting the faculty work, not only from our campus, but other great works that are out there where persons have pulled in marginalized voices, diversified their images, diversified the story, open pedagogy with students, so that they have a model that they can go from and they're not starting completely from scratch. We also have a library guide where we're going to be highlighting a lot of these examples, providing video. As part of my Spark capstone project, I have developed an asynchronous course that faculty can go through that teaches them about OER, and I am at this moment revising some of that to include modules that will walk them through how OER delves into social justice and inclusive excellence, and how it also supports the strategic pillars of our university, which play into this. And as Dr. Wilson mentioned, we want faculty to be recognized for this work through grant programs, through other incentives, through some of our award programs. We want them to be recognized for the work they're doing. We want to recognize those faculty who are excelling in this work, and also the faculty who simply kind of are brave and kind of jump in and help us lead with this. We want them to feel empowered and that the expertise they are developing is recognized. So as Dr. Wilson also mentioned, his plan was just launched about a month ago, and everyone is figuring out how they're going to incorporate this into their daily lives. So at this particular moment, we don't completely know what some of those assessments and the accountability we're going to hold them to is going to look like. If you have any ideas or comments on that, we'd welcome them at the end of this presentation. And so at this moment, we also don't completely know what success is going to look like for us, but we will be assessing. And my hope especially is that at an open ed in the very near future, we will be presenting on this again and walking you through exactly what worked, what didn't, and how successful we were. And now I am going to turn this over to CJ to talk to you about social justice in many of her OER programs.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I mentioned earlier when we were preparing for this presentation, I'm so fangirling over this whole project that they have implemented at their institution. I mentioned that what I do on my campus kind of feels a little bit more like guerrilla warfare. So I'm really excited by the enterprise level approach that they are taking to incorporating OERs and the social justice initiative along with that. So a little bit more about me. Nikki mentioned I'm assistant professor and learning and research support librarian at University of West Georgia. But one of my responsibilities is also to teach a 2-credit hour course on information literacy and research. And so librarians, we always have so many hats we wear. I'm also the library champion for a statewide institution, Affordable Learning Georgia, and so is Nikki, which is how our work kind of ends up dovetailing together and representing the day. We perform similar functions on our campus. And so in teaching my class, I often approach working with faculty the way that I teach undergraduates about information and knowledge production, right? Because a lot of times they're not really thinking about it, and they're not thinking about the economic, cultural, and political implications of it. So on the screen is a quote that I use to introduce this conversation to my students as well as to faculty. So the existing information system mirrors the larger social and political order, which is characterized by a radically asymmetrical distribution of power and is shot through systematically and structurally by racism, sexism, homophobia, militarism, and class oppression. And so I am trying to advance this slide, Nikki. Am I not able to do that? Oh, sorry, thanks. And thank you. And so in having that conversation, we understand that open education resources present an opportunity kind of to break that mold, right? We don't want to create the same disparities that exist in our traditional publishing formats. And so we have to create opportunities to allow faculty to critically engage with open content and understand the capacity that is inherent in open education pedagogy. So when I started doing this work, and still a great deal of it is focused on some of the economic implications of it, right? So that in and of itself is a social justice component by allowing every student to have access to all of the content on day one of the class. And that's still one of my biggest selling points because it does lead to an increase in retention rates and course completion rates. But that is not the limitation or the extent of the capability of open education resources. So I try to get faculty to understand the importance between just adopting it. And honestly, I'm really happy if they just choose to adopt some of the resources. But in addition to adopting those resources, what else can you do? How else can you make this content culturally inclusive so that your students respond better to this? And so that's when we go beyond that economic impact that open education materials can have into the cultural and political impact, and to really focus on what that looks like, what it looks like when you have diverse representation in your course content and throughout your course. What it looks like when you're considering the cultural implications or the political implications of the information and knowledge production, and making sure that students are also kind of aware of traditional information sources and how open education resources can allow them to also have a voice and to be able to impact knowledge production. So what you're looking at is the social justice framework. And this is what I share with my faculty when I'm doing workshops or working one-on-one with them, to just start thinking about their discipline and the ways in which disparities are kind of reproduced. And if they're not alerted to it and they don't have any background in it, they're not even thinking about it. But once you actually present them with this framework, they start thinking in some of the ways that there is not as much representation of women in the sciences or in math. And so they begin to think about it differently. So once you present them with this framework, they do start to critically engage with their content and think about ways that they can reformat existing OER resources. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, Nikki. Thanks. So one of the things I like to talk to them about is remixing versus adopting. And so the first step, honestly, is just getting that open content into the classroom and converting their traditional course to an OER course. And I mentioned to them that it does not have to all be done at once because it can feel overwhelming. And it is a lot of work and it's labor intensive. And I understand that. So it's about talking to them about how you can phase this in and the steps that you can take, but to begin to think about it and how you can bring students into the process as well, because that is working with students and producing open education resources is a high impact practice if you're actually implementing those open pedagogical practices in there as well. So the difference between remixing versus adopting, because if you're just using the content as is, and we understand that academia is still dominated majoritarily by white men. And so a lot of this content, of course, is disproportionately created by white men. And so you might have their perspective centered more than what you would if you were trying to create this culturally inclusive content. And so making a point to really go through the material that you're using or that you're planning to adopt and see how you can bring in those different cultural perspectives. And then how open education pedagogy, again, can bring in students who we know now, our campuses, especially at public institutions, are increasingly diverse. And so that is a wealth of opportunity right there to bring in more diverse voices into the knowledge production process. And it is a high impact practice. And also making sure that educators are aware of their publishing opportunities that are available to them. And so historically, everything is kind of hidden behind our learning management systems. But when I work with faculty, I try to talk to them about ways they can share their work and make it available, especially when they've gone through all of the labor of updating or reformatting their content to be culturally inclusive and making sure that that is distributed as well. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. All right, so what you're looking at is a textbook cover from the traditional textbook. I worked with a faculty in the College of Education to adapt or to convert her course to an OER course. And we found an existing educational psychology textbook, which was awesome because it is an upper division course. And so that's not always a possibility, especially in the realm of open education. You kind of have to source your material a little bit differently. But it had a really solid foundation. And she was a little reluctant to adopt this textbook and was not very pleased with it because it didn't tackle some of the social issues in the way that we would like to discuss them today. The conversation has been updated. And we also wanted to center more diverse voices in the textbook. And so you'll see that the traditional textbook had this just kind of standard image on the front of the textbook, and I was the technical know-how in this partnership with my limited technical ability, but we got through it. So when I republished the textbook, I made it a conscious and intentional effort to put a teacher of color on the cover and to put students of color on the cover. That was an intentional choice I made to improve representation just from the front cover. Students who are taking this course know that this content is representative of them and they're represented in this learning process as well. And so if you can go to the next slide. Thanks. Okay. So when we're talking about remixing, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so I have some examples of how we updated the textbook on the screen. So we wanted to reframe the conversation about achievement gaps in students who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds, are from diverse backgrounds, and how their test scores are not normally, or sometimes have disproportionate outcomes on standardized tests, which standardized tests have their own problems anyways, but I'm not here to reinvent K through 12 education. But in that conversation, we wanted to talk about problems or challenges that students face that are not indicative of their learning ability, but of some of the challenges that they face, the structural and societal systemic problems that they face. So I found an OER website that talked about the opportunity gap, and literally copied and pasted and gave credit to the textbook to update it. But there is a conversation about why it's so important to frame this as opposed to an achievement gap versus an opportunity gap, and how we can get young educators to begin thinking about some of the systemic and structural problems and what we can do to address it. And so that's on the left side of the screen is literally the OER text that exists now in the textbook. And then you'll see a little link that says read more, and I tried to highlight it in blue for you. And when you click on that link, it opens up to the article on the right side of the screen, which is obviously copyright protected. We want to respect the author's work. To have delved more into that conversation, and this is intentionally an article selected by an educator of color, talking about why it's so important that we change this narrative when we start speaking about our students and their ability to achieve and achieve the same outcomes as their students who have more access, who have more opportunity. And it's really not indicative of their ability to make learning gains, but it's because of the inputs and the structural issues that they're facing. You can advance to the next slide. And also just going a step further, right? So when we're remixing and this textbook, we didn't want it to feel supplemental. We didn't want it to feel periphery. We wanted it to feel like this was essential to the course and to their learning experience. And so some of the ancillary materials that we use for the course were already pre-existing and developed. And so we had to go back, of course, and create our own test banks and our own testing material to update the original content to include text questions, quiz questions. And so what you're looking at is just a test bank question that we wrote to account for the updates that we made to the textbook. So the students know that this content is as valuable as everything else that is included in the course. You can, thanks again. So that is how I approach the work on a kind of individual micro level. And so you can see how we kind of had this top down or enterprise level approach, and then what you can do one-on-one if you're a librarian or if you are in the discipline and you're trying to think about how you want to bring more diverse representation into your classroom. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It doesn't have to be immediate. As my co-presenters have said, they have set a framework for their course. And then, you know, we will figure this out as we go and develop, but setting the intention, setting the goal is part of getting started and the first step. And we'll open it up for questions now. Nikki, you're muted. You're still muted.
Y'all, I hit unmute 3 times. I swear to you. I love it when it does that. All these resources will be available to you is what I said. And yes, we are open for questions now.
And I will stop the recording now, so you can say whatever you want.